Welcome to the Wrestling Philosophy Show, where we discuss unique perspectives and beliefs on the sport of wrestling. Give us a follow or subscribe on various social media platforms, including YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Enjoy the show.
All right, here with Bernie, Super O, Erik Burnett, right?
There you go.
What other nicknames have you had, or do you have?
Man, once I went to college, it was Bernie. The guys at Clarion just started calling me Bernie. When I was a kid, my buddies on the baseball team called me Speedy. They shortened that up to Speed. And I wasn't by any stretch the fastest guy on the team, but it was like I was the smallest. So when I ran, I was like a cartoon, like my
faster.
Yeah, it looked like I was going. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, just a few of the nicknames.
Nice. So you played baseball too, growing up, then?
Yeah, it was my favorite sport growing up. I love baseball, man.
Oh, really?
I love my teammates. Back in the late 70s, man, it's what you did when you were a kid. You played sports, you know what I mean? And we ran around outside. When we weren't playing baseball with uniforms on or organized practices, we were playing in our backyards. You know, it was almost like you think Sandlot, you know.
Right.
And that for a couple of years, we actually had some neighborhood stuff going on. Like there were 5 of us, like Mark, Steph, and Steve, me. But there were 4 of us that lived on my street, and then a couple of kids that lived on Lincoln Street around the corner from us. And then behind us was Washington Circle and Roosevelt Court. So there were just a bunch of kids in these 3 little developments or these streets. So we would actually like try to organize and play, games in our backyard. And then, of course, at the end of our street, down by the fire station, was Legion Field. And that's where they played 11 and 12 age group baseball. So we were hot stove back in our day, right? So
okay,
it was class H was 9 and 10, and G was 11 and 12. So we had the G field down at the end of our street. So we were playing baseball all the time. When I was 9, I made one of the travel teams. Once again, not travel like today. Today travel baseball is like, hey, we're going to go to Georgia, or we're going to go to wherever. I mean, our travel baseball was, we went to Penfield, we went to Huntington, Litchfield, you know what I mean, North Ridgeville.
Right.
But they were really, really good teams. A lot of them, and it was very good baseball. And we actually won a hot stove state championship when I was 9. Of course, it was 9 and 10-year-olds. My dad coached. We had 3 other coaches that were really, really amazing. Well, my dad, I think our 9 and 10-year-old team, my dad didn't coach that much. He obviously worked with me and some of the other kids, but I don't think he was a coach on our team that year.
Wasn't the main coach of the team, right? But he's still
right. And he was never like the main coach. Like, so 2 years later, we got our whole team together again when I was 11 and we had moved up. And that year we played for Oberlin Sports Shop. So the first year we won, we were Schubert Buick. That was our team name. That was our sponsor.
Don't you love going back? I like the names.
Yeah. Well, my buddy just posted something on Facebook like 2 weeks ago. It was us. It was like 40 years to the date of us winning the state championship when we were on the 11 and 12-year-old team. Yeah, and that was Sports Shop. And, it's kind of crazy because I had this, man, if I could find this picture and show you, you'll recognize me as the dude with the cleanest uniform. Like, once we got to the playoff,
nobody
man,
guessed that.
I was like, I got my mandatory 2 innings in, and then they were like, all right, Speedy, go sit over there and enjoy the game, But that being said, we were all pretty good ball players. They were just that good. My teammates were really, really good. So yeah, growing up, that's what we did all the time, man. And so we learned how to be competitive, and that carried over for all of us. In 1986, our basketball team won a state championship, and a lot of those guys in that team were on our baseball team. You know what I mean? So it was like we were just uber competitive in everything we did. Our group of kids.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Right. No, 100%. And you start that young, and you just kind of learn from each other and get competitive. And right, you have something in line with your team. It goes a lot further than showing up once in a while competing, right?
Well, that's the thing. When my dad jumped in a lot on that 11 and 12-year-old team, like I said, the manager was our star pitcher's mother, and she was a bus driver. So she drove would drive us to like our state tournament on the bus. And then my dad and Mr. Talbert and Mr. Brigham were all managers, they were all coaches. And my dad was pretty hardcore. He ran infield practice, and but the kids were cool. They were cool with me. It wasn't like they didn't beat me up or anything because my dad was being a hard guy that day. They understood, and like I said, we learned a lot from it. I mean, those were truly our formative years, and we were learning from these mentors, and about huge life lessons about no making excuses and showing up for practice. And okay, it's 90 degrees, but we're going to practice. And then somebody's mom, whether it's my mom or whoever, is going to bring popsicles down. We're going to eat popsicles, and so we stay hydrated and all that stuff. So we learned how to battle, man. Cool. As far as we just learned how to persevere.
Nice. So I take it your dad played baseball. Did he wrestle too, or what was his?
No, he never wrestled. He played baseball. And he played football. Okay. And he went to Elyria High, and he was pretty good at what he did. I don't know that he played baseball in high school, but I know he played when he was growing up. And then so, but when he after the Marine Corps, he went into he wanted to learn a trade. He ended up being a machinist. Mm-hmm. And so those guys, they break everything down to like the millimeter, right? So when he does his job, everything it's got to be almost pinpoint. So that was kind of the way he did everything with me. You know what I mean? Like or with us, if he was coaching any one of our teams. I mean, when I played soccer, my dad learned about soccer, and when they needed a coach, he stepped in and coached. But he would break things down, and if he didn't know something, he would read about it, right, and try to figure it out. So when I got into wrestling, he would get me with the right people, and then if he sent me to a camp, he would give me a notebook, and he'd be like, "When you get home," he goes, "we need to have some notes in there so we can work on this stuff," right? And then we'd be in the living room, and dude, I was a peanut. Like I think when I first started wrestling, I was 6 years old and I was like 38 pounds. Like I was the smallest kid there. My dad's like, at the time was probably like 170 pounds, 170 pounds. And I come home from Oberlin Biddy wrestling on Saturday mornings, and he'd be like, "All right, what'd you learn?" And blah, blah. And so he'd have a list of stuff, and he'd be like, "All right, let's go through these things." And it'd be on the living room floor, right? And he'd be my partner. Right.
The list that he'd be your partner about 150 pounds more than you.
Yeah. He'd just kind of like, we were doing like referee's position. He wouldn't obviously put his weight on me, but he'd be like, "All right, 5 sit-outs." And I'd do 5 sit-outs, and it would have to be pretty good or it didn't count. We'd do another one, whatever. But it was never like punitive. Like he was never a jerk about it, or, you know what I mean? It was like, "Oh, let's try it again."
Just getting the right reps in, right? Just repetition, right?
Yeah. And then we started figuring out camps, and he researched and he figured out, okay, we really like, we really like the Mokoviches. We like Tadaki Hata a lot. Tadaki lived in my town. Right. So I got to do things with Coach Hata when I was like 8 or 9 years old. But my dad always said, take this notebook, put some notes in it, and I got to go to Bobby Douglas. I got to go. I got to do some really cool stuff when I was a kid, and but my dad was meticulous about it. Like he's like, if you're gonna do this, do it right. You know what I mean? Figure out the right way to do things, and so that carried over to me, I guess, as far as in how I coach is, know.
Right. So what was wrestling? He didn't wrestle, you said. So what did he have friends that had kids wrestling, or what was?
So his brother, my Uncle Glenn.
Okay.
My Uncle Glenn he's a few years younger than my dad. I think he's 4 years younger than him. He played basketball. Now my uncle's about 5'3", okay, and he's athletic. He's one of the most athletic people I've ever seen in my life. He played in a rec basketball league. I was probably 10 years old, 8, 9 or 10 years old. And my dad was like, "Come on, I'm going to take you over and watch your uncle play basketball." I'm like, "All right." So we went to some little elementary school over here in Elyria. And he like dominated. I mean, he's obviously he's like a point guard, he was a shooting guard, whatever he was, a point guard. His handles were ridiculous. He had a touch when he shot. It was crazy, man. So anyhow, when he was in high school, apparently the basketball coach said he was too small. So I think it was Frank Fiore was the coach here at Elyria High School back then. And Frank went and grabbed him. I think it was toward the end. What's that?
He's a Kent State guy, right? Wasn't there?
Yeah.
But go on.
So he went and grabbed my uncle out of class. Basically, I guess I'm paraphrasing, and said, "Hey, you got cut from the basketball team, so you're going to wrestle." And I'm not sure, if you know Frank Fiore, I'm not sure my uncle really had a choice. I think, it was like, okay. So he wrestled and he did okay. He actually did very, very well for being just so new to the sport, So I don't know, and I don't want to get him mixed up, but I don't know if he had Fiore and Coach Pearson. I don't know. I don't know if he had them both. Maybe the next year, because he would have wrestled just basically those 2 years. But anyhow, when I came home from school when I was in first grade, and I had this form, and I was like, "Hey, Dad, at Oberlin Biddy Wrestling, what do you think? Should I do it?" And he's like, "Yes." He's like, "You're a little guy, and your uncle was a little guy, and this sport is for everybody. And yes, you should absolutely try it." And that's kind of what happened there.
That's awesome. That's so fun.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's you rarely hear that, right? That a father didn't get involved. It's usually somebody, right? Either here, like you said, you get cut, or someone thinks it's the WWE, WWF, so they get into it, right, and show up.
Right.
No, it's funny. Speaking of being a little guy, I mentioned I was going through your Brakeman reports, right? For those that don't know, Brakeman wrote for nearly 40 years, probably, on Ohio wrestling, right before the internet, all that stuff. But in your senior year, right, you wrestled 112 as a senior, but he even mentioned there you're probably small enough to go 105. It's pretty, so you were always a little dude, huh?
I never really got, and I don't know, it's kind of chicken or the egg type stuff, man, because, we always believed, my dad believed it, and I believe it as well. He didn't believe in ever letting yourself get out of shape.
Right.
So even in the off season, whether it was going to wrestling camps or going to tournaments or whatever, you always stayed in shape. And obviously you got to give your body rest. He understood that. We understood that. But so for whatever reason, man, I never got over 115 and a half, 116 pounds, so the intention my senior year was obviously to go 119, right? Because you wanted to go up a weight,
right.
But I never really got over 116 pounds. I mean, when I was wrestling freestyle, I was wrestling 114 and a half, and I would just basically skip dinner on Friday night and then weigh in Saturday morning, and I'd be underweight, So it was a no-brainer to go 12 my senior year. Obviously, I wasn't going to cut the 5. It didn't make any sense, trying to get ready for college.
Right.
But so yeah, I was never big, and certainly was never that strong. Is in high school. Maybe my senior year I might have been a little bit strong, but not so much before that.
Well, here's what so going into your senior year, here's what Brakeman had to say. Okay, you're obviously ranked number 1, 1987, 112 pounds, right? Do you remember much from your 4 years? It seems like every year it's a little bit less for me, but do you remember much of your senior year?
Yeah, my senior year was weird, man. I think I actually wrestled better my junior year, you know what I mean, than I did my senior year.
Okay.
And I don't know why. It was one of those deals. I never ever felt like I put pressure on myself ever. I just didn't feel that way. I felt like I trained hard and always felt like whatever's going to happen happened. But I think maybe at some points I tightened up.
Okay.
And maybe didn't open up the way I would have wanted to. But yeah, that's a couple of things I remember about that year. I remember like the second round of the state tournament, I actually got caught on my back on the quarterfinals. Yeah, I was wrestling a guy from Delaware, Olentangy. He was really good, and I had wrestled him the year before. So I mean, obviously I was confident, but yeah, I hit a shot, and it ended up turning into a dump, and he kind of whipped me to my back. So I'm like kind of driving with my heels, you know what I mean? And it was 2-2, and it kind of weirded me out, you know what I mean? And I think I was still winning the match. I think it was like 8-3, and then it was 8-7, and then I got away, so it was like 9-7. But it was like, whoa, wait a minute, you know, because you know you're used to kind of winning big, right?
Right.
You know,
That's
that
funny.
point.
We busted my Drew's chops about he got caught in his back against a kid. Figure four to the head, caught on his back, didn't get pinned for like, you know, back when you could figure four to the head. And like, how did you not get pinned, Drew? Who was the ref? You know what I mean? He went by a point type thing. We still busted chops like, oh, so-and-so was the ref. Like someone we knew, but it wasn't, you know.
Right.
Drew gets so mad. Like, you know, the other brothers, you got figure four, and how'd you not get pinned? Like, you know, I forget if it was a sophomore or junior year against a Chanel kid, but Drew had that big old melon. But anyways, here's what Brakeman had to say. This is a fine weight class featuring a number of returning state qualifiers, but 3-time state champion Erik Burnett will nonetheless dominate the proceeding. Blessed with incredible quickness and great stamina, Burnett always wrestles 6 manic minutes as he works unceasingly for points and falls. One of Ohio's finest prospects, Burnett has wrestled strong competition throughout the state and has risen above it. A small 112 competitor, he could, I believe, easily make 105. Burnett has only 2 concerns. One, he must get a little better on the bottom, for he must get out to work his takedown magic. And 2, his unbelievable good barrel roll is so well known that he may have to switch to other takedowns to set up his bread and butter move. These are small quibbles indeed, when placed in the context of a better than 90 match winning streak with a schedule that has given him the opportunity to wrestle many of the best AAA competitors at his weight. Certainly barring injuries, his 4th state title seems assured, and a successful collegiate career a certainty. So for 2 things real quick, I don't know if that jars any memories, but obviously, right, you're the barrel roll, right? Left-handed barrel roll, right? Is that something your dad got? Was that from the Milkoviches, or what was that kind of passed down from?
Well, yeah, it was a combination. I went to a camp, and it was Frank Fiore. It was in Lorain County. I was a little kid, and they had it under canopies, man. It was outdoors.
Outside, really?
But yeah. It was really cool. So my dad took me to that. The Turnus brothers, you know, the brothers that coached over Southview, the legendary coaches at Southview. So they were there. Tommy Turnus had a wicked good fireman's carry, like back in the day when he was wrestling. My uncle knew him, right? Because they were almost in high school together. They may have been in high school together. I can't remember, but they knew each other. So I went to that, and I started messing around with the fireman's carry. So, but I was right-handed. And then I went to like an Ohio State camp, learned a few more things, and then ended up at the Milkovich camp. And that's when I got even more in depth with a carry. And then Tadaki Hata had a barrel roll, right? So I kind of connected on a barrel roll between the Milkoviches and Tadaki Hata with the barrel roll. You know, we were talking about before, like the Russians. I can't remember all the guys' names, but there was a Russian that my dad was like, "What? Watch his fireman's, watch his barrel roll." So it was just a combination of things that, you know, so I ended up getting pretty good with it. And then it was something, once again, okay, my dad's a machinist, right, by trade. So I don't know if we were at a soccer game or what, but I was playing on the left wing. And I played left wing because I was predominantly dominant. I was predominantly left-footed. Okay, that was the foot that I could control, whatever, felt stronger, whatnot. Of course, but I was right-handed with everything else. So my dad was like, "Hey, you should switch around and wrestle left-handed, you know, like it's no big deal." Right? Like, okay, yeah, well, yeah. So
how old were you at this point? How old were you?
I think I was 10.
Okay.
I think I was 10 the year we did this. So we started out doing it. I think it was in November, December, and it was rough, man. And he was like, just in practice, just do things the other way. And if you don't have success, don't worry about it, you know? But he's like, just keep trying. So I literally remember when it clicked, like it clicked. One day I hit it, and of course my right arm is dominant, right? So I felt stronger with it. So it just clicked. I had the left leg lead. It felt good. It was like boom, and I hit it, put some kid on his back, and I'm like, I got it. And then so yeah, that was like, I would have never thought that. Like, well, wrestle left-handed because you're right-handed, but you're left foot dominant, whatnot. I really think it was a good move on his part, man. You know,
100%. I mean, it's still being taught, right? I mean, it's still getting passed down. No, definitely. And I mean, that was your strength, right? And something different. And then just knowing your camp system too, right? You've talked about getting out and bottom, right? So then, you know, your camps, you focus on the bottom work too, right?
Yeah, you know, so I got to say something about Mr. Brakeman, man. Like, so first of all, he's spot on. I mean, he actually prognosticated what was going to happen. Like, I had to get more things going to offset the barrel roll, right? So you had to have a duck under the other way, whatever, right? But he probably watched my match my junior year with Steve Starcher in the finals. Right. And ultimately, that's what haunted me in college. I feel like I had success in college. I would consider my career successful, depending on, it's all perspective, right?
Right.
But it's like, is it what I wanted? And I'm like, I was thinking maybe not quite. Like I think I could have been an All-American a couple of times. I think I maybe could have been a little higher in the podium. But yeah, I wasn't good on the bottom. I wasn't. And that once again, that was magnified, you know, in the state finals. And what's funny is I think I got worse. I don't know if I was focusing too much on my feet, but I had success.
You won what, 11-3 in the finals? I mean, you still.
Yeah, my senior year was 11-3. My junior year was 12-4. Right. But my junior year, I had a 12-3 lead going into the last period.
Okay.
And Starcher picked top, and I was like, oh no, man, because he had knocked off Adam Disabato.
Disabato, right? Because that was supposed to be the matchup,
by
right?
tilting him up.
That was supposed to be the matchup, you versus Disabato, right?
Right. Yep. And it was like, so, you know, I'm thinking, I'm like, how, you know, there's no video back then. It's not like I'm going to scout the guy. I'm like,
that's what's even crazier for
man. And
Burnett,
everyone's
right?
like, man, he got that wrist.
That's even much crazier for Brakeman, right? Like, no video back then. It was all newspaper articles, and then he knew a lot of stuff.
Can you imagine that guy? That guy was brilliant. I mean, can you
he didn't wrestle. He didn't wrestle either. I'm pretty sure, right? He wasn't a wrestler. He just loved wrestling. Right. He was family with Demetrius from Brecksville, right? And he just loved wrestling, right?
Yeah. As far as I knew, his personal background with wrestling, as far as I don't know that he ever wrestled. I mean, this guy's like ringing people up from Southwest Ohio, coaches. Hey, what do you know about this? You know what I mean? There was no, I mean, calling people on the phone and asking them, what do you think about this guy and this guy and this guy? And, you know, it was weird, you know, at times, because you'd read that report and it was like, I mean, my freshman year, I wasn't in it. Right. It wasn't even.
You remember reading it, like where you're at each year, or where did kind of, what was that? Was it in the wrestling room? Was it at home? Where was it? Yeah. Was it the same place every year?
I remember my freshman year, we were at our conference tournament, and a couple guys on my team come over with this thing, and they're like, dude, I thought you were good. You're not even in here. Right. So, you know, because at the time I'm like undefeated, right? I hadn't lost. None of my friends had ever seen me lose, right? They come over like, well, these are supposed to be all the best guys in Ohio, and you're not even in there, bro. So whatever. I was like, wow. But you know what? That wasn't his fault, because it was
right. You're young and yeah.
Right.
There's nothing to go off of, right? From middle school or even freshman, right? I mean,
well, there was no OAC. There wasn't, like there's the OAC. Kids have that opportunity right now to wrestle the best guys around. There's no divisions. It's like, if you win that thing, man, everybody knows you. Hell, if you place in it, people know you, right? So it's like, but Brakeman didn't have any of that, right? he just was, you know,
no, that's
having it figured out.
No, he's his writing. I mean, his writing style, right? Everyone talks about, and then the history, and you know, I think his first year was 72, and the last year was 2012, right, somewhere in there. But yeah, man, pretty crazy. So yeah, going back to your junior year, same thing, right? You said the Disabato matchup. here's what he had to say. He's this weight and the next one both feature brilliant two-man duels that should rank with the best in AA history. So you went from AA one year to AAA. Is that what happened, or how?
No, I think Bishop Reedy might have gone from single to AA at one point.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Gotcha. He goes on. He said, early this year, my feeling was Burnett was unbeatable by anyone in the state, regardless of classification. I still feel that way. Yet many wrestling people whose opinions I respect now believe that Disabato is the better choice, that he will neutralize Burnett's incredible speed and beat him physically for the victory. Both boys have tremendous heart and will be outstanding college prospects as seniors. So this is your junior. So he knew, but my belief is that Burnett will prove to be more resourceful in their individual encounter. The other plus for Burnett is that his moves are always consistently 4 or 5 point variety, while Disabato tends to score in clumps of 2. In any case, this is an epic encounter that could well be repeated in 87. So, but then he ended up, like you say, losing the semis, right? And then you went on to win 12-4, right, in the finals. So,
yeah,
cool.
Yeah, it was wild, man. It was wild. Adam was really, really good. It was just one of those things, man. And then obviously, you see what he did in college. He was,
and then Brakeman was saying you guys were going to be college. He kind of knew as you guys were juniors, he knew what you guys were going to do in college. So pretty cool.
Yeah,
pretty wild.
Yeah.
So, no, that's funny though. Going back, you weren't in it, and your friends busting your chops that you weren't in it. That's and for you, you're probably like, whatever, right? Where some guys would probably get upset about it. You probably were like, whatever, right?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of was what it was. I was like, wow, my mindset was like, these guys must be really good, right? I mean, not that I was cocky. I never was cocky. But I thought I was pretty good, right? So when I see my name's not even there, like literally, dude, I'm flipping over the page. I'm like, where's number 21? I'm not even.
Isn't a page? So, where's the missing page at, right?
They forgot a page. So yeah, man. I mean, but it was funny because any guy that I would run into that was in there, it would kind of be a test. I could see, kids get all worked up about rankings and stuff right now. Right. Like, I wish that they would look at it like, all right, man, this is a cool opportunity. I'm wrestling the 5th ranked guy or whatever. This is a cool opportunity. Because I guess if I felt like somebody was good, I felt like it was a nice opportunity. And then fortunately, I was beating a bunch of those guys. So as the season went on, I just felt like I could do it. I could do things. And as you know, you set, I mean, my goals were literally one match at a time, from the, back then it was districts, regional, state, instead of sectionals, district, state. So yeah, it was one match at a time, always.
Cool. Yeah, for sure. So you go on, right? All-American at Clarion. When did you always know you wanted to come back and coach, or what kind of, you just knew wrestling was going to be part of your life, or what kind of inspired you to coach or come back to coach, or what was your inspiration behind coaching?
I did camps when I went to Clarion. I helped work their wrestling camps, and the way they had it set up was really cool because they would get upwards of 300 kids in a camp.
That was my first wrestling camp growing up, was Clarion.
So
yeah,
right. I mean, they had different gyms, right?
Power
so
bar.
Had broken down to 30
first time
in each gym.
Yeah, first time I had a power bar. I think they were sponsored by Power Bar. The bar that had a shirt and had Power Bar on the back, and I think we got like 2 free Power Bars or something. So
yeah, they totally hooked us up. Like before our dual meets and stuff like that, we had Power Bars, and then we had the drink, whatever the drink was. That was really good too. But yeah,
they'd split it up. Some would be up top in the gym, right? Some would be on the floor. But go on.
Yeah, North Gym, South Gym, and then you had like I think they had a group one year up in like one of the oh man, it was like a rec come up type hall. They had a group in there. They had a group in the wrestling room. They had 4 or 5 in the main gym, right? Because the main gym was big. So basically what you were getting between the instructor and then two or three counselors, they had it broken down to like a 7-to-1 ratio. You know what I mean? So they had 300 kids, but between all the staff members and whatnot, they had a nice breakdown. I really thought it was one of the best camps around. I'm not just saying that because I went to Clarion or I worked the camp, but as the years have gone by, and I've worked a lot of camps, and I do a lot of camps, and that was always that structure. Like we always try to keep it to where we can have a decent ratio as far as staff and kids and whatnot. And I thought Clarion did a great job of that. But what was really cool was they gave us a lot of responsibilities as counselors, right? Like we were in charge of these kids. And I'm not saying back at the dorm and stuff like that. I mean, yeah, you had dorm duty, but it wasn't every night. But it was like you were responsible for helping a kid get better. And you had the same kids all week in your gym. The instructors rotated, right? The technical instructors, the technicians rotated, where we were with these kids all week. So you develop these bonds and these relationships with these kids, right? And I went to Clarion as a 17-year-old that summer. I graduated from high school and I went to Clarion, and I was taking summer classes because I had to take the classes for the special kids that aren't quite ready for college, right? I had to take those classes, and I got a B and a C, and I got in. But anyhow, the coaches said, if you want to come in and like check out the camp, you can't be an employee, right? Because I wasn't technically a student there yet. And I was a Prop 48. All right. So I couldn't be a part of their program, but they were like, hey, you know, I was welcome to walk around the gym basically. Right. And you know, everything on my own. I could lift weights, I could do whatever. So I kind of just jumped in, you know, and just watched, and I'm like, man, this is cool. I can't wait to work camp, because I knew I couldn't work it that year.
Right.
So the following year I was allowed to work camp, and I got in there and I met groups from like Gallion, Northmore, and Olmsted Falls. And, you know, when you're 18 and some of these kids are 16, you're not that much older than them.
Right. Right.
But I was helping them. You know what I mean? Like coaching them, and hey man, you're not doing this dump right, or you need to hit this duck better. You got just little things, right? And I really enjoyed doing it. And kind of the feedback I got from the kids and the coaches. I mean, by the time I was, I think 20 years old, I was getting some calls from coaches in Ohio saying, hey, do you want to come in and do a 1-day clinic with our kids? And I think a lot of it had to do with kind of building those bonds. Right. You know, that throughout the week with the kids. Wrestling technique, yeah, cool. But it was like the bond and having fun and you know, just being somewhat of a positive influence, you know, and that's what I dug. And I knew at 18, 19 years old, I knew I'd coach. I didn't know what kind of profession I would be in, you know what I mean? But as far as work wise, but I knew I was going to be coaching.
You knew wrestling was going to be a part of your life then, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So fast forward, right? You know, you starting coaching, I guess, at what moment that you mentioned when the barrel roll clicked, you know, well, there's a moment in coaching where it's like, wow, like you felt like you kind of jumped levels. Was it a certain wrestler? Was it a certain coach you coached along with that you found like, wow, I'm getting the coaching thing? Like how stupid, you know, looking back, man, I was stupid for doing this. Now I get it type thing.
I had the opportunity to coach some college, and I was a volunteer coach at Clarion. And Sheldon Thomas gave me a compliment at one point and made me feel really good. And that was, I felt like I was doing a pretty good job, you know what I mean? But I was still coaching college and kind of trying to figure out what I wanted to do down the road. And I knew I loved working with kids, but I kind of wrestled around a lot with Sheldon and you know, he gave me a call. He told me I helped him, you know what I mean? And when you got a guy of that caliber, you know, he's a 3-time All-American, NCAA champion, you know, when he gave me that compliment, man, it meant a lot, you know what I mean? Where it's like, okay. And we were friends, don't get me wrong, right. But Sheldon was pretty honest about stuff. I don't think he would have just said that to, you know.
He was a little guy too, so I'm sure, right? You were grinding with them and giving him the looks he needed to see to accomplish that, right? So.
Yeah, and we had a lot of fun because we were pretty opposite in the way we wrestled, but we just had a lot of fun, and we're still friends today, man. I mean, we stay in touch, but that was a cool moment for me, you know what I mean? And it just confidence wise, it just helped me out, and I just kept doing what I did, I guess. But the biggest thing is, trying to, you build these relationships with people, man. And it's not, there's no like intentional networking, if that makes sense. Right. I mean, I guess if you're, maybe in the business world or something like that, but there's never been like intentional. It's always been, it's happened. You know what I mean? Like you work with some kids, you work with some teams, you do whatever. And then all of a sudden, whoa, this opportunity happens. You know what I mean?
You showed up, you did what you were supposed to do. You worked hard and developed relationships. And next thing you know, like you talked about, right? Before COVID, right? Would you go out to Wisconsin for the coaches? Was it Wisconsin, the Coaches Association?
Yeah. I got to go out there. Right? Yeah.
And it just happens, right? Because you're doing the right things and, putting the time in, right? And then all of a sudden you get a call to do that out of the blue, right? And it's like,
right.
And I'm sure, that was a couple of years ago now, right? What would be 2 years ago this fall, but
2 years ago, and 2019. Yeah.
What we were talking off air a little bit, the conversation out there was, right, the dad coach role, right? It's easier said than done sometimes, right? It's, the dad hat, coach hat, and obviously you seem to do it very well, right? Your dad did it very well too, right, with you and Scotty. But I guess what do you take away from that? Leading into that from, the dad coach role. What's some reflection points where you went right or maybe you went wrong, and kind of like words of advice for dad coaches.
Well, and going back to what we were just talking about before, I think, man, this is going to come out weird. I think sometimes you have to be organizationally disorganized, if that makes sense, right? Okay. So because when I first started running stuff back, and when Jim and Donna Pycraft built the first barn out in LaGrange, right? The first barn that we rolled in. And they were like, hey, come out and help us build it, right? And as we were talking about off the air, right? Like, I don't know how to use any hammers. I don't know the right-handed hammer, the left-handed hammer, right? So
I'm right there with you, brother.
I mean, yeah. So when I first started landscaping with the guy had me running around looking for dirt dissolve, bro. He had me going to different places to try to find the dirt dissolve that we could dump on the pile of dirt to make the dirt go away. Yeah, I don't know anything, right? So Mrs. Pycraft taught me how to use a nail gun. I remember doing that, putting the roof on. She did some stuff. She ran the electric. I learned a little bit about that. I learned how to use one of those guns that puts the screw in, like a drill. But anyhow, so then we started running stuff out of there, right? But I didn't have, so people would say, what are we doing? What's the next practice? And I would be like, we'll go Saturday morning, 10 to 12. But I had nobody's phone numbers, right? So we'd have like a blizzard. And I'm like, I got to go. You know what I mean? And and my friends, whoever I'm hanging out with, there's like, dude, it's a blizzard. You got 14 inches of snow overnight. I'm like, I got to go. I can't, I don't know who to call to tell them I'm not coming. Right. So because I was functionally disorganized, right, I showed up for things and there'd be like two people there. Right. And they're like, wow, this guy's crazy. He's super committed.
Great
which I was.
Right? Yeah, it was great one-on-one time, right? It got
absolutely
the best of that day.
And that was the thing. And you'd run a practice if one person showed up. Like Nino Paglia wrestled for Strong's. He's a state runner-up. Right. We weren't even done with the barn yet, man. We hadn't made the apartment yet. We had a half a mat rolled out in the wrestling room. And he and his dad somehow show up on like a Tuesday night or whatever. And they were thinking we had practice. And I'm like, all right, I'll throw my shoes on. And we went for like an hour and 15 minutes. And stuff like that goes so far, you know what I mean? Because the way I looked at it was, one, I had nothing better to do, literally, than wrestle. Mm-hmm. I mean, there were other things to do, right? That could be fun or whatever. But I had nothing better to do than wrestle. I could go golfing. I could go out on a boat. I could go to a Browns game. But there's nothing better than wrestling, if that makes sense. Especially when I was young and single. Right. I didn't have Janet. I didn't have my sons. They're obviously better than wrestling for me. Right. But it's like back then, what am I going to do? I'm 26, 27 years old, go sit in a bar.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
I did that stuff, right? I don't need that anymore. I got wrestling. I got these kids. It's like, let's go. So that was such a big thing for me, but it started out kind of accidental because I'm like, I just didn't have anybody's phone number. So whenever I said I was going to be somewhere, I was there, you know? Right. And so, you know, and that was so big for me because, you know, that's the biggest thing I tell these young coaches. When I was out in Wisconsin, just do what you say and say what you do, right? Just do it. Be where you're supposed to be, right? So when it comes to like the whole dad coach type thing, it's not that different, right? Like it's, you know, you try to set a decent example, you know, but our thing, the one thing that, and I think your family understands this too, because you have to, you know, wrestling was never going to destroy a relationship like in our house. It just wasn't going to, you know,
rule number one, right?
Right. It's a sport.
Didn't need to be said, right? It was just, that's what it was, right?
Well, it needed to be said sometimes, you know what I mean? When it was getting contentious,
yeah.
And I'm like, you're kidding me right now, right? You know, I'm not yelling at you. You know, either one of my kids, they're frustrated, whatnot. And I'm like, I'm not yelling, you know, hey, you want it. If this is what you want, then this is what you're going to do. And if you don't want it, then it's okay, right? We're still going to hang out. We're going to do whatever, you know. And there's a story about Mick, and I don't think Mick minds me telling it. I just told it at camp a couple of weeks ago. So when Mick first started wrestling, it was just, you know, Janet would bring in and I'd be running a youth workout or maybe one of my friends was running it and Mick would just come in and kind of hang out and he would jump in when he felt like it. And I'm talking very young, you know, 6 years old. And at the time I was already training Dylan Shaw, who was in mixed grade. Mm-hmm. But Dylan was pretty hardcore, even at like 5, 6 years old, you know. So if Mick would come in and I really wouldn't put him with Dylan, I'd put him with some other guys and whatnot. So then Mick decided to get a little more serious. And so my wife was bringing him and then Nate followed along and, you know, and then Nate would jump in when he felt like it. You know how it is, right? Hey, if you feel like it, jump in. Yeah. So, you know, fast forward a few years now, Nate was having some success because Nate was the king of the go behind. Okay. He absolutely refused to shoot. Like when he was like 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, he just refused to shoot. But it was weird because other kids kept shooting on him, right? So he would run around and score. And I'm like, okay, man, cool. You know? I'm like, what are you going to do when the guy doesn't shoot? He's like, I don't know. So anyhow, so Nate was having more success than Mick. And then we went to OYWA. We were in that league. Right. And you know how they have the sectionals of districts, right? So Mick had a pretty tough district. And he ended up taking 5th. And like Nate qualified for state, I think. And a bunch of his teammates on our little Elyria youth team qualified for state. So typically my wife and I would drive separate to these events for various reasons, whether I had another obligation somewhere else, whatever. But for some reason, and Mick, my sons would always ride with Janet. But for some reason on the way home that day, Mick jumped in the back of my truck. And so he gets in the back of a truck and I adjust my mirror and I'm like, hey, did you have fun today? And he would always say, yeah, I had fun, you know, because Mick was always having fun, right? And he said, no, I didn't have fun today. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? You're here with all your friends, whatever, you know? He's like, well, I didn't make it to state. He's like, and my friends made it to state and I didn't. And, you know, there's guys I think I can beat that are going to state. And I remember I looked at him in the mirror, man, and I was like, you know, you're very social during wrestling practice. You have a lot of fun. I'm like, I don't know if you work as hard as you could. And if you really want to win, if that's important to you, then the next practice, maybe you'll get after a little bit more. Or maybe you won't. I'm like, we're good. We just spent the day together, man. This is a cool day, you know? And that was a Sunday. Monday night, we had practice at Milan. And completely different. Came in, was grinding, worked hard, drilled hard, did everything right. And I was like, oh, and then it never changed. You know what I mean? So it's like that.
The switch was flipped, right?
Yeah. And that was him. That wasn't me. I didn't do anything. You know what I mean? He realized it. And so that was really cool. But once again, never, you know, if there were times when I would ask, hey, did you do any cardio today? You know, if we had the day off or whatever, I would ask, you know, it wasn't like you didn't go do your cardio, whatever. So I think sometimes just suggesting, you know, would be a reminder for them to go do some cardio, whatever. But it was never that thing where I made him do it or anything like that. Right. So, but then you got, you know, then you got the other hat, right? So you take the coach hat off, put the dad hat on, and it just turns into a different deal. You know what I mean? But as long as they recognize that, you're cool.
Right. No. Yeah. It's funny when you look back at those moments, some of the ones you remember and you know, how they turn out. And it's like, wow, that was a moment. Right. And at the time you didn't think it was going to be what it was, probably looking in that mirror. And then it turns into, well, I changed his path in a way, right? Just a simple, by him jumping in the car with you. Right. You know?
Yeah.
Cool.
I don't even know. And my wife was, so Janet's amazing because, I mean, she was into the kids. Like, hey, if she didn't feel like the effort was there, she'd let them know.
Right.
So there was no like, well, I'm going to go to mommy.
Right.
Whatever. You know what I mean? It was like,
you guys were on the same page.
Yeah. She was as real as you could get, you know, and it just kind of was what it was there, you know, but like I said, you know, having those two hats, like for me to coach and like, understand that my career is over and whatever I did, I'm stuck with essentially. Right. And it's got to be good enough for me. Right. And I'm never going to live vicariously through my sons. So when I'm coaching them, I'm like a dad with the best seat in the house, if that makes sense. Right. Like how many, like when I go watch my kid play baseball, I would love when they played, I would love to have a closer seat. I'd love to be on the bench. Right. I don't know enough about baseball to be on the bench. Right. I would just muck the works up, but it's like, here I am, man. My sons are wrestling, and I'm literally at some points 3 feet away from them. You know what I mean? And how cool is that?
Right.
You know.
Right. No, that is awesome. Some memories, right? You're making that you're gonna look back at. Oh, I forgot about this one, right? You're gonna tell a story, or someone's gonna tell a story. You know, I'm experiencing that with my dad. You know, hearing stories about my dad with some wrestlers that he talked to over the years, and like I never knew my dad did that, or talked to this guy about this, and it's just pretty cool hearing some
it's really cool doing stuff like this.
Yeah.
It jogs and jars memory, and you know what I mean. It's like you know, there's so many things that I mean, I could drone on, dude. Believe me, I don't want to bore you. I don't want to bore your audience. I could drone on for hours, you know, just about different things.
But, one was recently actually. Mick was up there helping coach. We had a tournament at Cedar Point in June. Marcus Gordon, they had the college, you know, thing going on. Marcus was there, and his dad was there, and then my dad showed up to watch. And Marcus's dad, you know, my dad, I will never forget what you told my son when he was a freshman down at State. And I guess my dad made him lay down in the middle of, I guess, I don't know if it was a Dayton or Shot, you know, where it was at. He said, lay down here. This building's never going to be bigger than it looks right now. So get out there and kick some ass or something. And here it is, you know, 20 years later, this, you know, Marcus's dad's telling me this story. I'm like, wow, I never knew that happened. So it's pretty cool to hear some of these throwback stories, but,
yeah, it's really awesome.
Yeah, no, man. So what's coming up? You got some camps? Do you guys got some fall Burnett camps coming up, or what's on the schedule right now?
I didn't plan anything for October yet because there's so many other opportunities. I know, Coach Matten up at Delta, he likes to put together this hammer camp.
Yeah.
So it's almost like a combine.
Yeah.
And I really would rather have our kids hit that. So, you know, I don't want to plan something in October. And then you have all the other tournaments. You have Grappler, you have a lot of stuff going on. So right now we're scheduled for September 3rd and 4th. We're going to do, Scotty and I are going to do a camp out in Milan.
Nice.
And that's really all we have officially scheduled for at this point in the fall. But that should be a lot of fun. We have a lot of kids signed up for it already. So I'm pretty stoked about that.
Cool. Awesome, man. Well, anything else you have, man? I want to, I know you got stuff to do today. I just want to make sure we got some stories out, and, you know, we can have you back on another time to tell some more, but thanks for sharing some of the ones you had. And, you know, I just the Brakeman stuff. I was like, man, I want to check that out. And it's pretty cool hearing what he had to say about it. It's pretty neat. It's
well, you know, you figure yourself out a little bit, man. You know what I mean? And I had some battles with Mark Marinelli You know what I mean?
Yeah, I
And
didn't bring
Mark,
those up, right? That's where Super, we talked about that before, but that's where Super O came from, right?
yeah, and I never knew about that.
Yeah.
You know, and Mark and I became friends years later. But man, I mean, that guy was such a competitor, you know, and you know, so after our freshman year,
You
that
wrestled
was the year.
the semis your freshman year, right?
I think it was quarters. I think it was quarters.
But then
year.
the finals your sophomore year, right? So you wrestled freshman, sophomore.
So when the Brakeman came out my sophomore year, he had Marinelli first. Now I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. I mean,
so yeah, Marinelli first, Burnett second. He said, let's see what he said here. Burnett upset Marinelli last year at Columbus in one of the best matches of the tourney, 6-4 in OT. He's lightning quick and superb on his feet. He emerged last season as something of an unknown, except for those close to age group wrestling where he has substantial experience. He lost in both district and regional competition last year, so his elevation to state champion was rather unexpected. So he was giving you a little more credit as a sophomore.
Yeah, it was just wild because, like I said, he was spot on. So I'm like, man, I don't know, this guy must be pretty good, you know. But you know, it's one of those things, man, where you grind. And I tell the kids about the rankings all the time. You know what those guys do? It can't go unappreciated, man. I love all the different rankings. I really dig what Mr. Brakeman did back in the day. It's, you know, it's very cool, you know. But on the flip side of that, you know, if the kids, if they don't use it in a positive way, if it ends up being negative, man, they need to learn how to, you know, just disregard it. If it bothers you, just disregard it. You know, I don't know.
No, it is a lot of time, but it's definitely, you know, a form of, you know, entertainment in a way, right? You know, you know, you got to take it for what it is and put a spin on what you need, right? You could have, you know, who knows, that it might have been the fuel you needed your freshman year. Man, this guy, I got to prove this guy wrong, or, you know, other people would view it that way, or, you know, I got to prove this guy right if I am picked, right? So it's how you approach it, right?
Well, right. Everything's a tool, right? Whether it's wrestling, whether it's coaching, you know, it's the rankings come out and you can use it for scouting or whatnot, or it's just, everything can be a tool. You know what I mean? It all depends on your perspective.
Right. Well, thanks, Erik. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to seeing you this season again. I'm sure I'll be running into you before then, but thanks for your time, man. I appreciate it.
No, you got it, man. Thanks for everything you guys do, man. And hit me up. Hook up anytime.
I know what's not fake news.
What's that?
When people say that they got a better corner rug than me.
They don't have the felt back, right?
No, man. I mean, that's fake news. That's fake news for sure. I mean, if you ain't got the green felt back, 100% nylon, you're just kind of, you're going to buy a rug again, I guess is how it comes down to. That won't be your last rug.
Right.
My rug could be your last rug. I mean, realistically, I mean, all the traffic you had on your rugs.
This was, yeah, right. We had them probably over 10 years and we used them for everything. I mean, everything. We used them not, you know, if we didn't use them on the mats, we used them to cover cords and stuff like that. So, I mean, no one used them more than us. Right.
Yeah. That's a long time. 10 years, man. You're going to get 10 years.
How many events we had, how much traffic, right? It's not like you're just doing a little high school tournament. Right. So, I mean, we're using them, you know, and, you know, probably 20 times a year. I don't know. Right. So who uses it? No one had, you know, so 20 times a year times 10 years. And, you know, so we got our use out, and we didn't need new ones, but right. We want to look right. So we got some new ones this year. We didn't need them all replaced, but we got some new ones this year. So.